All right, we're jumping right into a pretty serious security vulnerability in a Node.js library that honestly could be running in your application right this second. If you're a JavaScript dev, you're going to want to pay close attention to this one. Let's get to it.
So just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, look at that number, 13,000. That's how many times the binary parser library gets downloaded every single week. That is a huge footprint, which means a bug like this has a massive potential blast radius.
And really, that leads us to the most important question of the day, right? Is this thing, and more importantly, a vulnerable version of it, hiding somewhere in your dependency tree? Stick with me, and we're not only going to figure that out, but also show you exactly how to fix it.
So what is this library anyway? And how did a tool that so many people rely on become such a big security risk? Let's take a closer look at the flaw itself.
You know, the library itself is super useful. Binary parser is what's known as a parser builder. It basically gives developers a simple way to read and make sense of binary data. You know, things like integers, strings, stuff that isn't just plain text. It's a real workhorse for a ton of apps.
But hiding inside this handy tool was CVE 2026-1245. And listen, this isn't just some minor bug. This is a vulnerability that could let an attacker run their own JavaScript code right inside your application. And that, my friends, is where things get really, really serious.
So we hear this scary phrase, arbitrary code execution. But what does that actually mean for your project? What could a hacker really do? Let's break down the real-world danger here.
Now, don't just take my word for it. This is a direct warning from the CERT Coordination Center. They're saying an attacker could run code with the full permissions of your Node.js process. Think about that for a second. Whatever your app can do, the attacker can now do too.
And here's what that looks like. This could mean an attacker snooping around the local data on your server, actively changing how your application works, or worse, breaking out of the app entirely and running commands directly on the operating system. It's basically a full system compromise just waiting to happen.
Okay, so how does this even happen? How does an attacker get from simply sending some data to your application to completely taking it over? Let's trace the path of this exploit.
The whole problem starts with a technique called dynamic code generation. To be fast and flexible, binary parser builds its logic on the fly. It literally creates a string of JavaScript code and then uses the function constructor to compile and run it at runtime.
And this slide makes the attack vector crystal clear. On the left, if you, the developer, are defining the parser structure with your own hard-coded values, you're totally safe. The problem over on the right is when an application builds these definitions using untrusted input, like a field name that comes from a user or some other external source. And there it is, the root cause of it all, a lack of sanitization. The library just takes that user-supplied input and plops it directly into the string of code it's building. It doesn't check it, it doesn't clean it, so an attacker can craft some input that injects their own malicious commands.
Okay, enough doom and gloom. We understand the threat. We know how it works. Now for the most important part. How do you protect yourself? Let's walk through the steps you should be taking, like, right now.
First, a little context. The patch for this was actually released way back in November of 2025. The big public warning from CERT came a couple of months later. So the fix has been out there for a while, but you'd be surprised how many projects still haven't updated.
So here is your action plan. Step 1. Run an audit on your project's dependencies. See if binary parser is in there anywhere. Step 2. If you find it, upgrade to version 2.3.0 or anything newer immediately. And step 3, just as a general best practice, double-check that you're not building parsers with untrusted user input.
And hey, we've got to give a huge shout-out where it's due. This whole vulnerability was found and responsibly reported by security researcher Mayor Kaplan. It's because of their work that we can even have this conversation and lock down our apps today.
And that kind of brings us to our final thought. Fixing binary parser is what you need to do today, but it points to a much bigger picture. In this giant web of dependencies we all rely on, which one is going to be next? Proactively auditing your code and staying up to date isn't just a good idea anymore. It's absolutely essential. Thanks for joining this explainer.